you ask your question, please?
Yeah, the flies, are they pollinators?
The question is, are flies pollinators? And the answer is yes and no. Many of the early spring flowers are pollinated by flies. Most of the butterflies aren't very good pollinators, but most of the moths who work at night are good pollinators, and some of the butterflies are too. So it's a mixed bag, and you can get a pretty good clue. Catch them, put them on a pin, look at them, and if they don't have any hairs anywhere on their body, they probably aren't doing any pollinating. But you will find those little micro hairs with the plumose aspect on various or similar kind of things, and you have to start watching behavior because some are and some aren't. And I've been fooled both ways. Yes, Quest.
We have a moths that come at night and take the hummingbird feeders. So are these pollinators also?
If it's a moth at night, probably is. Most of the moths are pretty fuzzy, and you start looking at them and you watch them go from flower to flower, and they do the same thing as those bees that I was telling you that are like the teenagers walking through the kitchen. And most of the moths are like that. There's a question over here. Yes, ma'am.
So is the little tiny soil volcano or sand volcano the evidence of an underground, and are they sometimes underground with no evidence so that you wouldn't know to be careful?
The question is, are all the bee holes in the ground going to look like the ones that I showed you that look like miniature volcanoes? Will some not have any volcano surface at all, just a hole in the ground? And what you probably already know the answer to this is yes, yes, yes. And there are some, remember that diadacia that I told you needed a particular flower or wouldn't grow? They make a turret above the ground. And they go get water, and they come back and they make mud, and they stir it around, stir it around, stir it around, and then they build a turret. So you go out and you see this flat dirt, and here's a little turret that comes up. It's like they put a piece of pipe up there. And so it's more than you were suggesting. There are different kinds of ways the holes are made of the ones that live in the ground. Yes, very interesting. Yes, Wes.
We've all read about the colony collapse among honeybees in the last couple of years. How big a problem is that for the native bees?
Nobody knows. We can't tell because we don't have good baselines. And we can think about it and wring our hands, but we can't really tell. I can tell you, give you kind of information. There's a bumblebee in Washington State, Bombus occidentalis. It's called a white-butt bumblebee because the last three segments are just stark white, and everything before that on the abdomen is black as felt, black felt, and this is high contrast. And people know that they aren't seeing them in the field. And I've looked at the guys who do the studies on the Olympic Peninsula where they used to be caught a lot, and they go through every year, they do the same thing. And they start in the morning at one place down on the ocean shore, and then they go to several places. And what I've found in my own place near Wenatchee, Washington, is that this particular bumblebee is only foraging after 4 p.m. And so I've gone to the same meadow and worked it from 9 o'clock in the morning until noon, and there wasn't a Bombus occidentalis there. There was 4 other species of bumblebees, but not Bombus occidentalis. I gave up, went to the top of the mountain, came back down, and for some reason, I stopped at that meadow again at 4,000 foot level and got out in, it's a plant that grows about this high and it's white flowers. And the only thing that was out there was Bombus occidentalis. So I took a couple of voucher specimens, came back the next day, took photographs of them, came back the next week, did the same thing, came back 2 years in a row following that, and it's the same thing. They only are out before or after in the afternoon. And so that isn't published anywhere, and so we're doing things in the field trying to gather data, and we don't even know what we're doing. And so some of the data says they're not there, and what that means is when I was there, I didn't see any. Yes.
Can people actually be allergic to bees?
Absolutely.
Or are they mixing them up with wasps?
No, honeybee stings, people are allergic. My brother, for example, has an allergy to honeybees, and if he gets stung on the end of his finger, his whole arm will swell up and he can't bend his arm. Yeah, it's a very small percentage of the population of people can be allergic so that if they get stung in certain places, their breathing tubes will swell shut and they'll die. Yeah, Quest.
You mentioned that certain kinds of wasps prey on bees.
Yes.
Is it bad or good, or what effect does people having wasp traps do on the native bee populations?
I have any idea. The native bee population is like 10 times as big as the native wasp population is like 10 times as big as the bee population. But they're all up in the trees, getting the grubs out of the trees that would be foliating the forest if we didn't have all those wasps up there. And they only come to the flowers to gas up. Where the bees are there to get the food for their babes because they're vegetarian. And so you're asking a question for which we don't have an answer right now, and that's what makes my job so exciting. Good question. There were questions over here, and I've ignored you.
Question.
Yes, please.
Are the wild male bees similar to the male honeybees in that they're only from unfertilized eggs?
I don't know. I'm sorry. Do you know?
No. I mean, I know that
Does anybody in the room know?
The question is, honeybees, a male honeybee is an unfertilized egg. Only fertilized eggs turn into females. So is that universal for bees?
I think that's all of Hymenoptera. I think that holds true in all of
So
Hymenoptera.
what's Hymenoptera?
Oh, bees, ants, and wasps.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's a really intelligent question.
Yeah, and I said I think, I'm not sure. I've told you a lot of things I'm sure of, but I think that's the case.
Do the wild bees work the fruit trees down here in the valley?
Yeah, some people have been working on domesticating. You've heard of blue orchard bees, and those are megacylids, and they are as much as 70 times as efficient as honeybees. And you can get your own, or you can buy them commercially. And the same for alfalfa. Honeybees don't do well in alfalfa, but so you got most alfalfa is grown to be turned into salad to feed to the horses and cows. But some people want to grow salad gardens, so they got to have seeds to grow the alfalfa plant. So they want their alfalfa to go to seeds. So they have to have the alfalfa get fertilized, and honeybees don't do that well. And the one I showed you, where I showed you the succession of larvae that were growing, those are normally in the melandri, and that's what they're for, is they take the alfalfa all the way to seeds by fertilizing the seeds. Yes, please.
Are the mason bees that people are raising now, are they any kind of native species?
Yes, they are. Yeah, and there's several species. There's something like 87 species of just one genus of megacylidae, and they're megacylids. And I've shown you several of them. They tend to be blue or white colored, and they tend to have round abdomen. Yeah, and they all have brush on their tummy. Yes, please.
Those past 3 years, I have had visitors to my bee farm. They're the big bumblebees. What are they?
Don't know. Probably Nevadensis or Californicus. If I give you a card, will you call me when you see them there and I'm going to find out? We're talking about some kind of bees. Yeah, probably a queen, and I suspect that it's either Nevadensis or Californicus. Yeah. But please email or call and let me know, and I'll come and find it, and I'll answer your
It only
question.
visits my bee farm.
Yeah. Yes, question.
Okay, you know, you said that one bee could tell if what bee had been there before and all
Yes.
that kind of jazz. Well, I was wondering, like, if that bee doesn't like what the smell of that bee, does it just go somewhere else?
Yes.
Okay.
So she knocks on the door and sees if anybody home, somebody been here recently, and the answer is yes to both questions. She goes somewhere else. She doesn't waste her time.
Okay, so.
And if she answers a question, hey, there's lots of pollen here, nobody's been here recently, she stops and she picks it up.
So that's what, she knows that bee has already gotten the nectar from it, so that's why.
I don't know how she reasons, but both of those factors are things that she can identify with the sensors on her antenna.
So my other question was, does a flower only have so much nectar, or does it have a little bit and the bee gets it and then it makes more for later?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, continuous production. It's a balance that's necessary for the flowers to get fertilized and keep the bees going. And it runs out, of course, at a certain point, but it's continuous production. You suck it up and then come back a little later and there'll be some more. Yeah. It's a glandular production. Well, question in the back.
Difference between hornets and wasps.
Spelling of the word.
Is that meadow that you have at the beginning, is that what it's supposed to look like everywhere naturally?
Pretty much in North America is what all of our alpine meadows and national parks used to look like. And that's what all of our meadows used to look like.
So if that's habitat and that's reduced, wouldn't that be a direct tie to population of bees?
I'm not sure I understood your question.
If your habitat has been radically reduced, wouldn't that reduce the population of bees?
Yes. Yes. You take away their food, you take away their homes, and they disappear. And if you take away the bees, the homes disappear as well. The flowers and bees are in a balance, and when you disrupt that balance, you destroy the balance, and then you end up with cheatgrass and wind-pollinated stuff and sagebrush and, yeah.
I heard that honeybees are hard on our native bees because they're outdoors earlier.
Well, you know, the whole problem with honeybees and native bees, the question is, honeybees are hard on native bees because they're out foraging earlier. That's not true, because did I show you there's 600 species of native bees in Washington State? And there's some of the little tiny ones, like the ones at number 1 through 12 on the top. And some of those are already finished their life cycle out here. Out, see, the flowers are already grown. There's some little tiny flowers that have grown, and those bees have served their life cycle, and they're back in the ground, and they'll be there for another 11 months. And they're basically unknown. And so the reason that there's only 50 bees on that page, there's 600 here in Washington State, and many of them have already done their adult life cycle right now, and they won't appear again until next spring in late April or early April, late March. And the competition factor, we don't really have the means to do anything more than wring our hands and pull our hair. Yes, question.
Aren't honeybees way more finicky when it comes to
Honeybees are general.
They're high, windy, or not warm enough? Finicky honeybees. And pollinators.
You know, I avoid the subject of honeybees, and I have to tell you, I don't know. And really, I don't care. I like native bees.
I'm curious, we went through wildfire, 100,000 acres or so in this area. What impact does that have on the wild native bees, particularly the ground dwellers? Because it really...
Essentially none. If it's a periodic fire, because they're under the ground and they're insulated, and that's been going on for as long as there's been forests and fires. Yeah. And so it depends on several things, but the bees mostly are living under the ground, and once they're under the ground, they're not going to be bothered by anything until 11 months later when they emerge.
But then they wouldn't have the food when they come out.
Eat flowers.
Yeah, and so we're going to have to talk about somebody else about that. I came here to tell you about native bees, and I can't tell you about honeybees, and I can't tell you about ecology. Did I tell you about native bees?
600 species.
I like native bees.
Wow, thank you so much, John, for coming.